Well, hey, Vision. I am glad to see you this morning, and honestly, there's nowhere I'd rather be than at Vision Church these days. God is doing stuff every week. As we continue our Kingdom series today, ladies and girls, I need your help. So if you did not get a little pink piece of paper when you came in, raise your hand. Ladies, girls, if you didn't get one, raise your hand up. Take that thing, hold it close. Don't let any men or boys see it. All right, this is your instructions of how you're going to help me in today's message. Now, as we're kind of looking back at how this Kingdom series has been going, if you missed any of the messages, you can catch them online. But hey, how about last week, the closing song by Lasagna and that team? Did you guys enjoy that? Oh, my goodness. If you missed it, or honestly, if you just want to hear it again, make sure you go on the Facebook page, and the Vision Facebook page, and check it out. But when Lasagna was up here singing, it was just beautiful. And of course, I told Mitch and the guys, I said, man, you've got a tall order, because we got another song we're ending with today. And it was interesting, the responses I heard leaving the first service, they said, man, that was pretty incredible too. So make sure that you are dialed in at the end, particularly the guys, as we keep on this Kingdom series with Kingdom Man today as our topic. But again, that doesn't mean you ladies can check out. You can definitely take some notes to drive home today and talk with your husband about. But seriously, women, there will be also something in this message for you. But specifically for the men today, let's dig into this thing. You got your takeaway card or get on your phone. Let's talk about how society really, it pushes men to go a certain direction. It tries to box us in. It tries to paint a picture that says, guys, you need to be like this if you want to be successful. Honestly, doesn't it say to us, you need to be rich. You need to have so much money that you'd be like Bill Gates, and you'd be the richest man in America. And if you're not rich, then I guess you're just not that good. Or it'd say, you need to be the smartest guy. Like this guy, Magnus Carlsen. I don't know if we got any chess fans in here, but he's like the grand master of chess, known as the smartest guy in America. So saying, guys, you got to be smart. Okay, how about strength? Always it's saying you got to be stronger. You got to be faster. You got to be more athletic. You got to be like this guy. His name is Brian Shaw, but honestly, I thought for a minute it was Bill Geither. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's Bill. Oh no, that's Brian. Okay. And you got to be strong, guys. You got to be muscular. You got to be like this next guy, Dwayne Johnson. You got to be like the sexiest man alive. You got to be. And if you're not, and you're like, ladies, is your guy like pretty handsome, pretty smart? Oh, yeah, definitely. I see some nods. I see some questioning looks. That's okay. He can't see you. He can't see what you're doing. That's okay. I see you. No. Seriously, though, the world is saying you got to be rich. I mean, you got to be smart and strong and sexy, or else you're not really a man. God says, no, I got a different measuring stick. I got a different way I'm looking at this. And Jesus, God's Son, says, I'm looking for a kingdom man. A guy who's going to look at these opposing kingdoms in this world and say, will you be a part of my kingdom? Will you look at it my way? And in fact, today's bottom line, it's simple. That a kingdom man really is going to be described by two characteristics. Number one, he spends time with God. And number two, he tries to live like Jesus. You're like, Matt, that's too simple. So, no, it's actually very challenging. But the reality is, guys, to be a kingdom man, we spend time with God and we try to live like Jesus. And you might say, well, Matt, shouldn't you say, you got to live like Jesus? You got to do that, Dave. The reality is, me and Dave, we're trying, but man, there's some days, there's a whole lot of Dave and not much Jesus, and a whole lot of Matt and not much Jesus, but we keep fighting. We keep trying to live like Jesus. That's our target on the wall, to spend time with God, to live like Jesus. Well, Jesus, he's excited about you guys, about you kingdom men, and he's cheering for you, but the reality is that Satan, he's trying to defeat you. Man, Pat, that's not good news. We got an enemy. He's coming after us, guys. I'm dead serious. He's coming after you. You getting ready to have your first child? He's coming after you. He's coming after your mind. He's coming after your heart. He's trying to beat you down and say, the progress you're making, no, it's not real. What you're feeling, it's just feelings. It's not real. The enemy is trying to take you out, and Jesus is saying, I need some kingdom men to go on this journey with me to win. Well, let's talk about what it looks like to spend time with God and what it looks like to live like Jesus. But the reality is, I'm not going to dig deep into those pieces because hopefully you get that here 50 Sundays a year. You're hearing me talk about what it means to spend time with God. You're hearing what it's like to live like Jesus. But guys, let's think about this. To spend time with God, and I want to encourage you guys, take your takeaway card home with you and dig into the men on the takeaway card who I see in the Bible that spend time with Jesus, spend time with God. Guys from Old and New Testament, guys like Moses, guys like Daniel, guys like Paul, who when you look in those verses and read those passages, you say, that's what it looks like to spend time with God. For us as men today, we would spend time with God by getting in the Word. And I know you're busy. Man, I know you got work and a family, and you got to do all these things and pay bills, and there's no time. If you spend even 5 minutes a day reading the Word and praying and consistently do that, God's going to do something in you. Spending time with God in our conversations, spending time with God in the things we listen to, men, the more we pour Him into us, it will change us if we spend time with God. The second piece of it, of trying to live like Jesus, and what does that look like? To be a man who's known as maybe not being so rough and tumble, but being a guy who cares, a guy who's transparent, a guy who is willing to serve. And as I unpack this today, I said, man, we can be kingdom men that truly try to live like Jesus, and it will make a difference in our world. Because, guys, we're in a battle. And I hope you sense that here at Vision, that we are real enough to say, hey, I'm in that battle with you. A battle for our mind, a battle for what we look at, a battle against sexual sin, a battle against integrity issues. And men, integrity to me is doing the right thing even when no one's looking. That we would be kingdom men, that even when no one's watching you at work, even when no one is watching you on the computer, when you're handling your money, that you would do the right thing even when no one's looking. These battles are going on within us as men. So I want to help. I want to help. Now there's two items we're going to pull out here in a little while to kind of give you some visuals on this. The two words I want us to focus on today, and you say, well, Matt, they're kind of in opposition to each other. They're tender, warrior. That Jesus is looking for a man who would be willing, even as a teenager, to be a tender warrior. And you say, wait a second, a warrior? Man, I think of somebody with, swords and scars and who's going to crash and be loud and violent. Okay, we'll unpack warrior here in a minute. But the reality is, nobody wants to hang out with a bull in a china shop. You might think, that's kind of cool, man. He's tough and rugged. No, what's also cool is a guy who's tender, a guy who kids will come to him, a guy who you'd want to hang out with, and that you know that he will try to be a man under control, under God's control. That this balance in being, yes, a warrior, but also having tenderness to you is the kind of man that Jesus is looking for in a kingdom man. Now today, the guy we're looking at, his name's Jonathan. Jonathan from the Old Testament was the son of Saul. Now Saul was the guy who was the first king of Israel. Back when Israel originally didn't have a king. In fact, God was their king, but they said, man, we want a guy. We want somebody we can touch and see that's a king. So God gives them Saul. And Saul has some ups and downs. He does. But this guy, Jonathan, who grows up watching his dad as a king, I think he's watching him say, man, is this the kind of man I want to be? And this guy, Jonathan, who we'll see, is a warrior and is tender, is someone that men we can learn from. Now, guys, here's part of my challenge to you. I'm not digging into the whole story of Jonathan today. I'm digging into the warrior side. So I know that our teenage boys will like that. Because anytime in church you talk about blood and destruction and heads chopped off and stuff like that, the boys are locked in. Zach's like, I'm with you, man. I'm with you on that. But this guy, Jonathan, this week, I encourage you to read further on in 1 Samuel, and you'll see stories of this guy who was a friend with David. You know David, the one who took down Goliath? This David loved Jonathan. They were close friends. There was a tenderness to Jonathan that balanced out the warrior. So this story in 1 Samuel 14, talking about Jonathan as an Israelite. These guys, Israel, were in a conflict. There was a battle between Israel and the Philistines. And they got to this point where there was bloodshed, and then there was kind of like a stalemate, and they're like in their separate camps, and they're trying to figure out, how are we going to figure out in this war, where to go, how to end it. And Jonathan, I think he's hanging back watching. Say, okay, what's my dad going to do? What's the king going to do? What are all his men going to do? Now, When we talk about today this story, I'm going to say there's a time to pray and there's a time to act. And both of those things are important. But what's key as kingdom men, they're having the wisdom to know when to pray and when to act. Because when we pick up this story, King Saul, I think he's been spending a lot of time praying. In fact, I think he's using it as a crutch to where when it looks like it's time to act, that he's sitting on his hands, talking to his buddies, saying, well, what do you think we should do? Should we go forward? Should we not? And I think he's, like I said, using it as a crutch instead of action, that he's just sitting. So we pick this up in 1 Samuel 14. This guy Jonathan said, one day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side. But he didn't tell his dad. Now Saul, he was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men. So again, they're sitting there, I think, just strategizing, talking, trying to figure out what do we do next. And I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe that God had already put on his heart to go and attack. And Saul was just sitting. Now, Jonathan, though, he says, God, I think you want me to act. I've been praying. And what you've put on my heart to do is to act. So he says to his armor bearer, hey man, let's go. It's me and you, a couple swords against all of them, because me plus you plus God can take down them. So they start on their way. And as they get close to him, I believe Jonathan was praying, because we can act and also pray. And he's going and he's acting and he's moving. And I think he's praying, saying, okay, God, I need you to show me by the way they react to me, whether I'm supposed to go, I'm supposed to stay. What do you want me to do in the battle? So let's pick this up, continue the story. As they're heading there, and Jonathan's really thinking, okay, if I say, hey, up there, I'm coming. If they say to me, wait down there, we're going to come get you, then I'm going to wait. But if they say, come and get me, I'm going to go. So verse 12 says, the men of the outpost, they shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, come up to us. We'll teach you a lesson. Get up here, little man. And Jonathan's like, that's all I need to hear. God is telling me to go. So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. So Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet. Now don't miss this here. The descriptiveness of hands and feet means that Jonathan had to work hard to get up there. This wasn't just a path. This wasn't even an incline. This was something that he had to use his hands and feet to climb up. So man, let me tell you, when it's time to be a warrior, sometimes it's going to be tough work. It's going to be hard. You take that first step and you're like, come on, God, do you want me to go? And God says, yes, but there's a lot of work in front of you. It's going to be hard. So he's climbing with his hands and feet, with his armor bearer right behind him. It says the Philistines, they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. Now listen to this, boys. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area about half an acre. Zach, you want to be a part of that? You want to carry a sword up there with God's power in you. You go in a room maybe like this size, you and one buddy, and you take out 20 of them. That is really hard, okay? Even if you're great on a sword, you're fighting these Philistines who are trained to kill. Man, you're chopping off arms, you're jabbing them, heads are rolling, blood's flying. It's great because that's what God wants you doing. He wants you fighting as a warrior in that moment. So Jonathan does what God asked him and compelled him and inspired him to do. He goes up there and he fights as a warrior, and he's victorious. Well, throughout the story then, we see some interesting things because it says in the Bible that there was a panic among the Philistines, and the ground shook. Now get this. There was no panic because of Jonathan. There was a panic because of the power of God. So when you act, men, as a warrior and are obedient, God's power will go way beyond what you can do. God will do things that you could never do on your own. So indeed, the Philistines are like, oh man, we're in a panic. We don't know what to do. The ground's shaking. What do we do? It's crazy. They start turning on each other. They're killing each other. It's unexplainable. And when God is working through a warrior, indeed, it's unexplainable. Now, what we also see in this is that Saul and all his guys sitting underneath the tree, you know, if it was like today, social media, I think one of the guys is sitting there and he's like, whoa, man, what's the armor bearer posting? Man, look at this Facebook Live. There's like blood flying over there across the way. What is going on? And they're like, and they look up and they see a panic happening. And they're like, how did this happen? Who's not here? And they do a quick inventory, and all it's gone is Jonathan and the armor bearer. So don't miss this, men. When you act in God's power as a warrior, it will inspire others to also act as a warrior. So Saul and his guys, man, they pack it up and say, man, it's time to go. Let's go. And they go over there and engage in battle, following Jonathan's lead. And you see in the last verse, it says, so on that day, the Lord saved Israel and the battle moved on toward Beth-aven. So guys, I want us to be encouraged that even when we have the fear of saying, can I be a warrior? Can God work in and through me? It's not just you riding on it. It's maybe you and your family riding on it. It's maybe you and another family who'd be watching riding on it. It might be you and our church riding on it. That God may put it in your heart to do that and to act like a warrior to inspire others to also act like a warrior. Now, let's talk about these tools. And actually, Tommy, can you help me a second and come up here, open this up, because there's two tools I want us to focus on. And if you pull it open, and the first one to focus on is the broom. Would you give me that? All right, so this first tool, thank you. This first tool of a broom is what a tender warrior will use in battle. And you're like, man, I ain't sweeping no floors. Man, I own my own business. Man, I'm a millionaire. Man, I got a good job. Man, I got my wife to sweep the floors. I got my kid to sweep the floors. I'm not sweeping any floors. Or I'm not cleaning any toilets. Or I'm not changing any diapers. I'm not going to do that. Let me tell you then, guys, you're putting a cap on God's power working through you. Because when we choose to be a tender warrior who will have the humility to literally to take a knee and say, God, you asked me to do it, I'll do it. You give me a broom, I'll sweep. This morning, when I pulled up front and stopped up front to get some supplies out, and I came in and dropped some off, and I noticed out there was a bunch of leaves on the sidewalk. I come walking out, and one of the men here was out front sweeping off the sidewalk. And I put my arm around him and said, man, you have no idea that I'm going to talk about this today, that we need men who will be willing to sweep the sidewalk. Because Jesus is looking not just for warriors, but tender warriors who will be willing to have the humility to serve. Now, the second tool, Tom, if you'd help me out one more time. This tool, I was going to have Zach bring it up, but I got worried because when you have an axe in church, you don't give it to a teenage boy, okay? Okay? But this axe is the other half of being a tender warrior, because when you take an axe and you start, working on some wood, and you're like, honestly, that's exciting and scary. And, okay, guys, if you've never done it before, you go outside and chop some wood, man, it's just natural, man. You just feel a little more like a man. Now, you might get hurt, okay? You might pull something. You might get something come off and hit you. You might watch out your feet, your toes. But literally, if you want to go into work tomorrow and kind of like get some looks, be like, hey, what'd you do yesterday? I watched football. What'd you do? Man, I chopped some wood. Man, I had an axe. I was chopping some wood. And they're like, ooh, man, that's a man. Like, well, so anyways, with this axe, Jesus is looking for some guys who want to be a kingdom man, who want to be a warrior. A tender warrior, because when you have an axe, you can't just use it all crazy. You have to be under control. But you have to have power, and that power comes from God to be a tender warrior. Well, men, first of all, repeat after me. Tender, warrior. Tender, warrior. We got brooms. We got axes. You put them together, man, you give God a chance to work through us, whether you're 8, 18, 68. God wants tender warriors. Well, to me, honestly, it's amazing that God even allows us to be a part of this thing, because he could have won that battle on his own. God could have sent the panic and shook the ground, and the Philistines, it could have gone crazy without Jonathan. But don't miss this, guys. God, although he can carry out his work through his own power, he chooses to do it through you. He could do it through his own power, but he chooses to do it through you. So instead of him just sending all that mess down the Philistines, he gave Jonathan a chance to be a tender warrior. When it comes time in your life to be a warrior, honestly, he probably could do it without you. But he gives you a chance to trust him, to grow in him, to inspire others. That is part of the awesomeness of God, is that he has this big picture that we can't understand. And while there is a time to act, there is a time to pray, we as men need to have wisdom to know the difference. So let me talk about that for just a minute. Because if you saw what happened in my life this week, there was something that happened in my life that was about the time to act. Now, Monday night, me and Meg go to sleep. We stayed up a little late for us. I got that nickname, Pastor Bedtime, because it's like, I'm supposed to go to sleep so early. I'm like, okay, it's 11:30. We're going to bed Monday night. 1 o'clock in the morning, Meg wakes me up. She says, Matt, the backyard is on fire. I'm like, what? She pulls up the shade. I see flames in our backyard. So what if I'd have stopped for a minute and said, Meg, let's stop and pray for a minute. Let's stop by the side of the bed and pray, God, give us wisdom of what to do in this moment. God, give us a plan of how to respond to the fire. She'd pick up that axe and she'd beat me over the head with it, wouldn't she? It was time to act. I jump out of bed, I run around, get a pair of shoes on, I'm running out in the backyard, and the area where our dog houses are is on fire. The flames are above my head. Now, I thank God it wasn't a week earlier, because you remember how dry things were before the rain? I thank God that Meg normally is asleep at 1 in the morning. She just, for some reason, couldn't fall asleep. So as I go running out there thinking, this could reach our house. This could hit the fence. This could go through the leaves. This could get to our house. I go running out there and see the flames. Meg's calling the fire department. I do a quick eval, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the side closet, grab some buckets, and on our pool, which has a cover, I knew that water had collected on there. So I start grabbing it and throwing it, and grabbing it and throwing it, and I'm just fighting fire. So that for about 5 minutes, I am not sure whether I'm going to be able to keep this back or not, or whether it's coming toward our house. A neighbor saw it. He came over and helped. We fight this thing down to where finally, when the fire department gets there, there's only about 10% of it left going. But literally, it was one of the 2 times in my life that I have been scared for my family's safety. Now, it was interesting. At 1:15 in the morning, fighting a fire in my backyard, and Meg doesn't like this, but for a moment, it hit me, this is going to be a great illustration on Sunday. And I kept bailing water. And specifically, God told me that, men, there are some times when you are the only line of defense between danger and the people you love. Whether you got a family or not, man, you may be the only line of defense between danger and somebody. That, God, he could have put that fire out in my backyard, but he gave me the chance to do it. So, men, there is a time to act. But I don't want to downplay the fact that there's also a time to pray. And how interesting that last week I had a moment with a guy here at Vision who came by the church, and he said, Matt, we're having a terrible time as a family. What we're going through right now, I don't know if I can handle it. And we sat right here and we talked. And I realized in that moment, it wasn't time for him to be a warrior. It wasn't time for him to act. It was time for him to pray. So we went from right there to right here and got down on our knees and we prayed. And actually, just to be honest, it was so heavy on him, he couldn't pray. So I prayed for him. And I put my hand on his shoulder and we prayed. And when we finished, I told him, I said, thank you for letting me do that, because there will be a time when I need you to do that for me. That I am so burdened by something that I need someone to kneel down with me and pray. And in that moment, it was not time to be a warrior. It was time to be tender. So in that moment, and in the moment with the fire, God reminded me that, yes, a tender warrior is who he wants as a kingdom man. So guys, you might say, but why be a kingdom man? I mean, why can't I just kind of be nice and kind of try and do things a certain way? No. Being a kingdom man is following the example of Jesus. And I will unpack that fully next week as we have our Christmas services and talk about the King of the kingdom. That enough is the why. But beyond that, I want you to think about, man, don't you like winning? I mean, don't you hate losing? I mean, I've played basketball, Brian. I know he hates losing. Not as much as I do. I really hate losing. But man, seriously, don't you like winning? Don't you want to follow a leader who is the ultimate winner? Don't you want to follow a leader who has the most wisdom of all time? A leader who has patience and peace beyond what we can understand. Don't you want to follow a king in Jesus who has depth of life purpose and says, I will help you understand what real life purpose is? I want to follow somebody like that. Because this guy, Jesus, the one who defeated death, for us men, he literally makes us want to say, God, I want to praise you. God be praised. Or in the old language, hallelujah. God be praised. You are the winner. I want to be on the winning team. I want that, Jesus. I want to be a kingdom man. So this season of Christmas is literally about making a choice. And for men, today it's for you to make a choice of if you'd be willing to literally take a knee and say, I want to be a kingdom man. I want to be a guy who will sweep and who will swing an axe and will be a tender warrior for Jesus.